10 books in 10 minutes, part 1. I was in a church in Taunton the other day, and it had a Christian bookshop with a second-hand section with loads of books at £1 each, loads of them really, really good. So I bought a whole stack of books that I already had because I wanted to give them all away. And that made me think, what would be the 10 books that I'd most love to give away to pretty much every Christian that I know? So this is the first of 2 videos of 10 books in 10 minutes. Here are the first 5. Book number 1, God's Smuggler. By Brother Andrew. This is the guy who's the founder of Open Doors, the charity that we support as a church. And this is a story of how he went from a little village in Holland to starting to smuggle Bibles behind the Iron Curtain into communist Eastern Europe after the war. Loads of miraculous escapes from security guards and soldiers at the different borders and in the different countries. Amazing stories of courage and of how God was at work in these faithful Christians under immense persecution. So if you want a really encouraging story of God at work, an inspiring story of faith and courage, God's Smuggler by Brother Andrew. That's book 1. Book 2, kind of related. David Garrison, A Wind in the House of Islam. Open Doors now, with the end of the Iron Curtain and Eastern Europe, are now operating to a great deal in Muslim countries because those are the ones now that are most close to the gospel, along with places like China and North Korea. And this is a story of how God is at work in Muslim countries around the world. We often get the impression that there are very few converts from a Muslim background to Christianity, that it's really hard ground and an area where it's difficult for the gospel to make progress. Well, this blows that completely out of the water. There's so many amazing stories of people from Muslim backgrounds becoming Christians, discovering the true Saviour, the true Messiah, Jesus, in all sorts of amazing ways. And again, stories of courage and faith under immense persecution where there's a danger of death, of imprisonment, of being thrown out of your job, of being rejected by your family. But God is at work throughout the Muslim world, very much in secret in many, many places. But the gospel of Jesus is finding fruitful ground in loads of hearts in Muslim majority countries. So that's A Wind in the House of Islam, David Garrison, really great book. Book number 3 out of 10 is Rob Parsons' A 60-Minute Marriage. This is something that I like to give away to couples who are getting married at St James if I can. Parsons goes through in about 60 minutes of reading time 10 different areas in marriage where often those are things where couples stumble in communication, in accepting each other, in dealing with conflict, in sex, in parenting, in debt, and so on, and gives some wonderful practical tips grounded in real life stories of how we can do our best in couples in those areas. Parsons makes the comment at the end of the book that the marriage vows themselves anticipate hard times, for better and for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. He says there's a time when the vows will be called in and we'll have to get to make our marriages work above and beyond how we feel about each other and actually have a really deep friendship and partnership in these areas. So really practical book, really easy to read, really applicable, and can massively enhance the quality of our relationships. 60-Minute Marriage by Rob Parsons. Book number 4 is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, the famous Narnia writer, also a very prominent Christian and defender of the Christian faith in his day. And this is his argument for the Christian faith for people who don't have any Christian faith at all. And he starts with our sense of morality and works from that to say, well, the best explanation for this and the way that we understand morality and justice is the Christian faith. He looks at Jesus, he looks at all sorts of different things and why Christianity has the only adequate answer to the world's problems. And there's the famous passage in here about how that Jesus is either mad, bad or God. You can't simply dismiss him as a good teacher because the things that Jesus said were way, way bigger than that. You either have to accept him as son of God or see him as a lunatic or see him as a demonic deceiver. Great book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis. And finally, book 5 of the 10 is Jackie Pullinger, Chasing the Dragon. This is one of the first books I read as a Christian. Amazing story of a lady who went in her early 20s, no experience of the mission field. I just felt that God was calling her to go to Hong Kong. And she ended up in a place called the Walled City, which is this ghastly slum tower blocks full of prostitutes and gangs and drug dealers and goodness knows what. And she just went there and she prayed and she tried to do what God was telling her to do, and she saw in the end hundreds and hundreds of people coming off drugs, coming out of prostitutions, coming out of the gangs, some incredible miracles. So it's an amazing story of faith, of how God is at work in even the darkest places and how God transformed this hideous slum and drew many people out of it into life in Jesus. So that's Chasing the Dragon by Jackie Pullinger. So that's book 5, along with Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis, 60-Minute Marriage, got Rob Parsons, Wind in the House of Islam by David Garrison, get that right, and God Smuggler by Brother Andrew. That's books 1 to 5 of my 10 books in 10 minutes.